This podcast was produced by OAR FM Dunedin with support from New Zealand On Air.
The Science Notes podcast on OAR FM Dunedin, brought to you by the Division of Sciences at the University of Otago. I'm Dave McMorrin. Over the next half hour, I'll be chatting with a graduate science student about their research, their passion for science, and the things that fuel their creativity. Well, hello there, and welcome to another episode of Science Notes. My name's Dave McMorrin, and this time our guest is Ryan Hartman. Hi, Ryan.
Hey, Dave. How you doing?
I'm well. Thanks for coming along.
Awesome.
Ryan's doing a PhD in psychology, and we don't often have many psychologists on the show, so that's cool. But part of the consequence of that is that we're going to be doing stuff that's quite out of my wheelhouse tonight. But that's all right. I'm sure we will get through it fine.
It's all good. I can hold your hand through it if you want.
Indeed.
Dave.
So long as you know more than me, then we'll be fine. So we're going to be talking about dualism, which seems to me to be as much philosophy as anything else. But before we get into that, maybe we can talk a bit about how you've ended up. Your accent would suggest that you're not a Dunedin native.
Definitely.
So how do you find yourself in Dunedin?
Yeah. So I'm originally from California. And I came here, that would be pushing 19 years ago.
Right.
By this point. So my family came over from California in due time to miss the whole Donald Trump thing. So
okay, cool. Good.
Kind of a, pretty lucky accidit.
So it's a nice place to come and a nice reason to leave.
Oh, yes, 100%. And
I'm sure we're not supposed to be political on the show,
yeah.
but still.
I mean, science is supposed to be apolitical, right?
Correct, yeah.
Yeah, sure. And so we kind of came to the North Island first and completed my early training there, early education and stuff like that.
Yep.
And then we came into high school in Nelson.
Right. Nice.
It came up in Nelson, nice little spot. And then it came out to Otago for university.
Right.
And I've been a student for about coming into my 6th or 7th year now.
Sure. So you came down to do a degree in psychology?
Yeah. I was originally coming in actually for the health sciences.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah.
Oh, so I might have taught you then.
I didn't quite get to the point of actually signing up for health science first year.
Cool.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah. And then I ended up studying psychology, actually.
Yeah.
Because I actually had a high school teacher that taught psych.
Right. So you did some psych at school.
Yeah, a little bit of kind of.
It is a thing now in New Zealand.
It
you
is.
can do a little bit. Yeah.
It is. And it was actually really rare, at least when I was in high school, to have a high school teacher that had a psych degree. We learned about like the classics like Freud and kind of Harlow's like monkey studies and stuff like that. And I do think it kind of made the transfer into the kind of early papers at like a university level. It made those a little easier to understand. That was quite nice.
I think there's a lot of good stuff that you can talk about at that level. The psychology. I mean, I don't know about you, but I'm a big fan of Malcolm Gladwell. I've read all of his stuff.
Not familiar.
And a lot of that is kind of just taking these classic psychology experiments and kind of explaining them and what they're about and why they mean and why they're so amazing.
Yeah, sure. Interesting.
So it's good that sort of stuff is there along with just the boring old standards like chemistry.
Yeah, no, of course.
So you came down here then,
Yep.
psych degree.
Yep.
Pretty full on from my seeing from the outside about psych.
Yes.
But not in a bad way.
No. I mean, it was definitely a pretty big adjustment period. I mean, I guess there's the added pressure of coming to university and stuff like that.
Yep.
But I did find like the standards for university a lot different than in high school. But in psych especially, I find it's like, I don't know, I always say this to all my friends of where it's like it's enough of a science to be difficult, but it's enough of a humanity where you actually have to have some kind of theoretical chops and really be able to argue your point and debate and stuff like that. But I guess that's why I love it personally, that it is kind of, it hits that sweet spot between art and a science.
Yep. So you did a degree.
Yes.
And then masters or honours for you?
Ended up doing honours.
Yep. So that's one more year after your degree these days.
Yes.
Yep. And then into the PhD after that.
Yes, I did the jump from honours to PhD.
Yep.
Because the wisdom was effectively that you didn't really need a master's if you kind of already did the honours program.
Yep.
And yeah, I would say honours was probably the biggest spike in just intensity.
Yep.
However, I did find that, I don't know, it really felt that it's like I'm actually being trained how to be an actual academic in this, instead of just like, here's what a neuron looks like, here's all of this kind of basic kind of foundational stuff. Yeah.
I mean, I did the same thing. The structure of the degree was a bit different, but yeah, the honours year was the year where you worked out whether actually this is what you wanted to do.
100%.
Whether the failure that comes with everything was going to be something you could deal with, and this was actually research was going to be you.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it was definitely my first real kind of exposure to the actual research process and what that's going to entail. And yeah, I'm really happy I did it.
Cool.
I mean, got me into the PhD after all. So,
so were you doing something similar for your fourth year project as what you're doing now? Or?
No, something completely different.
Yeah, cool.
Like, psych is so broad that it's like you can do something at like an undergraduate level as like a research project and completely pivot and still be under the same supervisor.
Yeah.
Where, oh God, I'm trying to think. My honors project was, I think it was about like memory, about how, I think there's this theory, I think it's called like the Zeigarnik effect or something like that, about how if you leave a task incomplete, you'll have a better kind of a memory, a better recall for it afterwards. And we were examining if it was just simply the fact of leaving something incomplete and not like, I don't know, a time delay or some other third variable that actually gave those effects. Of course, all of our results were non-significant, but
they were results. But
they were results. Yes. Yeah. But,
and so now, as you say, you pivoted into something that's similar but different, into dualism.
More different than similar, but yes.
Yeah. So tell us about dualism.
All right. So dualism is this idea of I guess the word of it simply means dual nature, two things, right? It kind of crops up, at least when we talk about these kind of abstract theories of like light and dark, right? You know, that'd be like a dualistic dichotomy.
Yep.
But in this sense, in kind of the philosophical sense, thinkers like Aristotle and Plato and Descartes.
And now you.
And now me.
In the same sense. Yeah.
In the same loose sense, sure. Engaging in a little bit of what's the term? Of intellectual arrogance to put myself on the same pedestal as them. But yes. But basically, dualism is this idea of that there are kind of two fundamental kind of substances. There's kind of stuff that's like material and there's stuff that's immaterial.
Yep.
Now, this particular branch of dualism, the full name, I believe, is mind-body. I think it's my brain's blanking. Substance dualism.
Yep.
Where there are two kind of substances: the mind, the kind of source of all kind of mental activity, like mental stuff that goes on, and then the body. Right. Now, in terms of, it's kind of come into a bit of contention, especially as we've gotten better with like neuroscience and brain imaging, and ironically in other avenues of psych that we've now come to understand the brain as very much the site of all of the mental stuff.
Yep.
And so at least in the area of philosophy, it's kind of this antiquated idea,
Yep.
this kind of outdated thesis that people, in the words of, I think, a philosophy co-supervisor, like not something that they take very seriously.
Yeah. So because Plato and Aristotle
Yes.
didn't have access to real-time MRI imaging and stuff.
Yes.
So the scientific advances that have been made now
Yep.
allow us to see where emotions
Yeah.
come from in
Yeah.
terms of lighting up parts in your brain and stuff.
Yes, true, accurate. And on top of that, the kind of premises baked into dualism is kind of that. I guess you could say it's like mind over matter,
Yep.
right? Where if your soul wills it, the flesh will carry forth.
Yep.
Right. But I don't know. Almost intuitively, we kind of know that's not true. But we get hungry. Our stomach growls, and then we're like, "Oh, I'm now hangry."
Yeah.
Because of that, right?
Yep.
As in a bodily state affecting kind of a mind state.
So there's a willingness now to accept that these things ought to have some sort of physiological basis.
Yes.
Which wouldn't have been the case back in the day.
Certainly not.
Yeah.
I mean, even close to the end of Descartes' career, I think in a couple of his letters, even he was forced to admit that there must be some kind of area of like interface in between the soul and the body. He came up with the pineal gland, which we now know off the top of my head, I believe produces like melatonin, the hormone that helps us get to sleep and stuff like that. And my guess is that he kind of cut open a brain and said, yeah, that's something at the core of the brain, so that must be something important. Oh, okay, therefore that's kind of the seat of the soul. What's interesting is that we do actually find, and there are actually a couple of papers I cite in my thesis about this, is that there's this growing body of research that posits that we are kind of intuitively dualistic. We kind of come with this kind of a dualistic thinking part and parcel of our cognition.
Right.
Some thinkers believe this to be kind of a byproduct of how we've evolved in terms of language and reading emotions, but largely perceiving others' minds.
Right.
Right. And that's kind of this integral piece of like empathy and cooperation and like emotion. And they theorize that, like, okay, I know that this table in front of me, the microphone in front of my face, this doesn't have a mind. But you, David, you, by my best estimate, have a mind.
Most days.
Most days, yeah, sure. And thus, like, you are kind of like worthy of, moral consideration, like, I'm interested in like working with you and stuff like that. And so dualism comes in, again, according to these current theories, is that that it's almost a evolutionary accident because, like, okay, I can perceive a mind, but I can't interact with it. I can't touch it. I can't see it. I can't
in the way that you can with the table.
In the way that I can with the table, exactly.
Right.
And so I guess they believe that it kind of comes from that ability of mind perception. And really, there are a couple of thinkers that kind of deny that at the moment. But what I'm more interested is kind of the implications of dualism.
Sure. Yeah.
And kind of this kind of intuitive dualism question is a interesting but not as important.
Yeah. Because you are doing a PhD in psych rather than philosophy.
Yes.
So you're more
exactly.
interested in sort of the manifestation of these ideas. And,
yes.
And in particular, I think in the notes that you've sent me, in how this affects people's attitudes about their health.
Yes. Yes, exactly.
So tell me, so I suppose you're a scientist, you're doing experiments. What are the experiments that you're doing? to try and explore this?
Yeah, sure. I mean, we kind of actually inherited this idea from, it was only like one group of authors that have actually examined this, at least, to the best of our knowledge and our research. And I think they just ran this very basic study where they showed people this block of text detailing everything that kind of a dualism implies and what it entails, and kind of primed people with this, right?
Yep.
They showed them this kind of a vignette, and then they got them to answer I think it was just like a basic health behavior questionnaire asking about like hygiene practices, exercise, diet, that kind of thing.
Yep.
And they found that those that scored higher on this kind of, those that were shown the dualism text scored lower on the health measure.
Right.
As in dualists had worse health. And so they kind of postulated about this, and they put forward this argument that viewing the mind and body as separate but kind of instrumentally connected things can at best permit or at worst encourage kind of this really, I guess you could say, kind of pursuit of hedonism.
Yep.
Right? Because, I mean, I would say hedonism, the consequences of that really are only bodily.
Yep.
And so if you're like, I don't really care about the body so much, right? Like I'm Ryan, I kind of occupy this body for X however many of years, and then I'm off somewhere else.
Yep.
It's this idea of kind of, I guess, abusing the body. I
knew a guy in chemistry who used to have this motto for life: I'm here for a good time, not a long time.
Exactly.
And it's that sort of idea, yeah.
Exactly that.
Yep.
And so we're investigating if I don't know, a dualism is kind of connected to that.
Yep.
Or if we can prime people with dualism, if that might actually increase that tendency.
Right.
But all of this is eventually coming full circle to answer your question, Dave, that we have done at this point, we've done about 4 studies on this issue.
So trying to do the same thing that these other guys did,
yes,
but better?
A more high-powered replication.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Where these guys published 2 papers on this. They did a 2012 paper, and then they did a replication in 2018. And what's interesting is that they so off the bat, there isn't actually a lot of evidence for the conclusion they drew. And so that's kind of the immediate off the bat,
right.
Hey, we're just going to replicate this and see what comes out. But I guess the more interesting thing that we find is that dualism is kind of very intimately connected with a belief in kind of, broadly speaking, like the supernatural.
Yep.
Right?
Yeah.
So that can kind of manifest in ways like I guess new agey kind of spiritualism beliefs, but as well we do also see people that are affiliated with a religion and kind of personally believe in a religion do tend to have higher dualism. Which,
so in other words, if they have a belief in they follow a religion, they're more likely to separate their physical needs from their mental needs.
Yes. In this avenue, here's kind of where it gets a bit murky, where original substance dualism, they keep using the words soul and mind interchangeably. And that's still an issue that even now we're kind of grappling with, right? Like even in some of the items with these dualism scales, they will use mind and soul interchangeably. And I don't know, at least in my mind, as I guess a psych student, I'm like, actually those 2 things are quite different. And they kind of bring different things to mind.
Yeah, I mean,
think about them.
I suppose for me, I would say the mind is something that you can potentially experiment on in
Yes.
some sort of fancy scanning system.
Yes.
But a soul is a different thing.
Yes. I mean, I'm not a kind of religious man personally, but from my understanding of the soul is that I believe it to be some kind of, I guess, animating spirit, I guess, for lack of a better word, some kind of life force that serves these kind of spiritual functions, right?
A purpose or something.
Some purpose or something like that. But the mind is kind of your, idea generation, your cognition, your memory storage and stuff like that. Even though we also know that has kind of brain-related underpinnings and stuff like that, right?
Yeah.
But what's interesting is that that we believe, me and my supervisor, Jamin Halberstadt, actually, we kind of believe, at least on a rhetorical level, that in order to believe in a religion, which kind of comes part and parcel with all of these other types of beliefs of like, oh, my soul will continue after I die. So afterlife beliefs, I mean, even the existence of some shapeless, formless omni-god up in the sky, all of that leans on some belief in something existing without a body, which sounds very similar to dualism, right?
Indeed, yes. Yep.
And so what's interesting is that these original authors didn't really examine these kind of religious, spiritual beliefs. And now there is a reason, I'm coming full circle here, that we also see in the health literature that people that believe in a religion actually have better health benefits. So to the point of, I think there's one longitudinal study which found that people that were affiliated with a religion had like a lower all-cause mortality.
Yeah.
Like, as in, they lived longer than people that weren't.
Yeah. And in fact, my
religious.
wife works for a community of nuns.
Interesting.
And some of them are stupidly old.
Yeah.
Many of them are well into their 80s and 90s.
Yeah.
So, it is a thing.
Yeah.
And yet the dualism would argue, my take would argue that if you do have this belief that there is something beyond, then maybe you would be less concerned about your health. Because there are higher purposes for your existence. Yeah,
it's kind of, I think of it in the same way as any other tool, right? Or any other kind of frame of thinking, right? Like, I don't know. I don't think it's as straightforward as, oh, I'm a dualist, but I don't believe in a religion, and so I'm going to go off to I don't know, a chain smoke until an early grave. I think, as with all things in psych, it is multifaceted, it is complex, and again, this is probably just one factor in a very, very large model.
Yeah. But it is one, as you say, that isn't very well studied.
Isn't very well understood,
And needs to be.
Yeah. And so that's been quite interesting. But coming back to my original studies, unfortunately, we have been doing a bunch of kind of replications around the studies done by the original authors, and we actually find that as of yet we've been unsuccessful in getting a direct, I guess, replication of their results.
Right.
Now, what is interesting is that we've kind of been factoring in affiliation with a religion and kind of endorsement of those types of beliefs. We've been factoring that into the model this whole time.
When the previous guys didn't.
When the previous guys didn't.
Yeah.
And so one possibility, again, it's still really young. we're not quite sure where this is going to go. But one possible theory is that, okay, we haven't been able to find the effects that these original guys had when we have these other factors in the model. And so now one thing we're working on is to go all the way back to the drawing board, and it's like, hey, let's just do pretty much exactly as they did, and let's see how it shakes out.
Sure.
However, the one thing we have found reasonably consistently is that those that were affiliated with a religion, but not so much on the belief front, it's specifically with the affiliation.
Interesting.
They are simultaneously higher in dualism, but also have slightly better health effects.
Right.
So our theory for this is that, well, perhaps it's these kind of lifestyle benefits that come with being a part of a community kind of
church as a social group rather than as a religious.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. And perhaps those are actually strong enough to kind of overshadow these kind of deleterious effects of dualism as seen in these earlier studies.
Right.
Again, all of this is kind of academic. Kind of.
But this is
navel-gazing.
This is what you're doing, right?
Yeah.
This is what a PhD is about.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
A whole lot of academic navel-gazing.
Yeah. We're pretty much out of time.
Oh, sweet.
Thank you, Ryan.
Oh, good.
How far through are you?
I'm just coming into my third year.
Okay, so almost to the end, almost the writing.
Almost to writing, yes.
Well, all the best for it. Thanks
Awesome.
again for coming in
Sweet.
and telling us what you've been up to. It's very interesting.
Thanks,
Cheers.
Dave. Cheers.
And thank you everyone out there for listening. We'll see you next time. You've been listening to the Science Notes podcast, brought to you by the Division of Sciences at the University of Otago. To listen again or to find other episodes in this series, go to Otago Access Radio's website, oar.org.nz, or to your favourite podcast platform.
This podcast was produced by OAR FM Dunedin with support from New Zealand On the Air.